General Chemo out, make us stay in. What is really behind the army reshuffle? My dear compatriot, good evening. This Monday, August 2026 at 5 p.m. news on CRTV, a piece of information dropped that on the surface looks like routine administrative business, appointment and promotion decrees within the defense and security forces. But when you dig a little bit and you know that here at Cameroon Wahala, we always dig, you find something else. You find a two-star general removed from the most strategic post in the army. You find an 87 years old chief of defense staff, sick, absent for months, kept in place against all organizational logic. And you find a presidential guard that keeps climbing the rank. So here tonight's question: does this reshuffle serve the effectiveness of our armed forces, or does it serve certain people's positioning just in case? Stay with me. Let's start with what we actually know. Factually, before any interpretation, three decrees were signed this Monday by President Paul Biya. First, General Hector Marie Chemo leaves his post as Major General of Armed Forces, a heavyweight position in our army architecture, coordinating the day-to-day operation of the entire armed forces. He is replaced by General Hippolyte Ebaka, promoted to general rank only a year ago. Second, Brigadier General Raymond Jean-Charles Beko Abondo, commander of the Presidential Guard, the unit responsible for the close protection of the head of state and institutions, is elevated to the rank of Brigadier General. His mission at the head of the guards doesn't change, his rank does. Third, several colonels are promoted to general officers rank and take on strategic posts. General Romance Minzwinzo now heads the Rapid Intervention Brigade, the BRI, not to be confused. I should clarify to avoid any on-air confusion with the B, still coordinated by General Francois Peleni. General Valenka takes over the Joint School and Training Center command, succeeding General Philimpa, who passed away this past May. That is the skeleton of the facts, plain, dried, and verifiable. Now, my dear compatriots, let's move into the analysis before facts alone, because facts alone never tell the whole story. What is striking about this reshuffle isn't just what changed, it is what didn't. General Rene Claude Meka, Chief of Defense Staff, 87 years old, reportedly ill and absent from public life for several months, was not replaced. He stays in place at the top. In any army organized on strictly operational logic, the chief of staff absent for months on health grounds will normally be expected to be replaced, or better still, to have his function clearly delegated. That is not what happened here. Instead, the directly the man directly beneath him, the Major General, was replaced, while the top itself was left untouched. Is that a coincidence? Maybe. Is it a signal? That is the question we have to ask ourselves without assigning intent to anyone, simply by observing the logic of the facts. A chief of staff kept in place, but weakened, surrounded by a Major General only promoted last year, and therefore, to some extent, indebted for his recent career to the current hierarchy. That isn't necessarily the setup you will choose if pure operational effectiveness were the primary goals. And this, my dear compatriot, is where things get particularly interesting. You remember our previous coverage of Captain Effoudou affair, this former intelligence officer, now exiled in France, who has multiplied his explosive public statement, accusation against the Secretary General of the Presidency, allegations of the troop voting against the regime in 2025, suspicious about network within the gendarmerie, promise of revelation about state affairs, including Martinez Ogo assassination. Since this statement began, we have observed a continuous and documented pattern of movement within the security apparatus. The removal of General Chemu in a disputed second section retirement affair, we covered the heavily commented decoration ceremony between Gongo and the Baboki. And now this reshuffled on Monday. So are these the effects of Captain Effoudu's statement already bearing fruit? I will say this with the caution it requires. We are not establishing any direct proven causal link between Effoudu's statement and these decrees. At this stage, no one can assert that with certainty, and we will never relay an accusation we cannot substantiate. But what we can observe as analysts is a striking timing coincidence and a visible nervousness at the top of the security apparatus since this allegation started circulating. And in politics, as in military strategy, repeated coincidences eventually draw a pattern. So, dear friends, let's go back to our opening question: effectiveness or positioning in case the first hypothesis. One could argue the leadership is simply trying to rejuvenate and professionalize Operation Command. Ibaka promoted a year ago Minzwinzo Nka, why the symbolic top maker stays in place for reason of institutional stability, pending a smoother transition down the line. Second hypothesis, positioning just in case. In this scenario, what matters isn't operational performance, but the personal loyalty of the men placed in key posts, the presidential guards, the brain, the major general's office. You consolidate an inner circle of trust around the center of power in a context where President Paul Biya, 93 years old, has been staying in Europe for 55 days, and where speculation about the post-Biya era has never been more intense. I will be honest with you, my dear compatriot. The two hypotheses are mutually exclusive. It is entirely possible a single move serves both objectives at once. That's actually how often major institutional maneuvers work in regime where the top of the state is growing fragile. What is certain is that the question of the reliability of the presidential signature themselves, raised in several comments, deserve to be asked without being settled by us tonight. We don't have the element to confirm or deny it, and we won't speculate on that ground. And now, a word for you who have been with us since the beginning. I am speaking especially to those of you in your mid 40s, 50s, or even 60 and beyond. You who have lived through several generations of generals, several reshuffled, several promises of change, you know better than anyone how raw information without perspective can mislead rather than enlighten. Every script you watch on this channel represents hours of verification, cross-checking, and historical context setting. This isn't improvisation, it is work, and we do not do that work for one reason only, so that you can form a free, informed opinion without filter, exactly as our tagline has promised from day one. If this edition help you see things more clearly, then that is not an accident. It is the result of an editorial choice we stand behind week after week with seriousness. And I will say this with conviction. Acting on solid information is already a political act. Sharing this video is already a political act. You don't change Cameroon by remaining a silent spectator. You take part by spreading the analysis, by asking questions, by refusing disinformation. That is why I am asking you sincerely, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and if you are able, join our membership program. It is not a commercial gimmick. It is what allowed us to keep producing this level of analysis week after week without depending on anyone but you. So, my dear compatriot, effectiveness or positioning, just in case, I will leave that question with you deliberately open, because it is you, our audience, who shape tomorrow's public debate. Tell me in the comment that what you think, and above all, stay alert, stay informed. This is Cyril the Man for Cameroon Wahala, African political news without filter. See you soon.